usually when we talk about measuring something in our lives,
Right.
there's this underlying expectation of just like total precision.
Right. Yeah. We want the world to behave like a piece of well-engineered machinery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you want to know how warm it is outside, you look at a thermometer and it says 72 degrees, boom, done.
Or you break your arm, right? And the X-ray shows that stark white line on the black background.
Right, and the doctor just taps the screen and says, there it is.
Yeah.
It's so concrete.
It's binary. I mean, the state of the world is either one thing or the other, and we have a tool to quantify it. We as humans have this, well, it's a deep psychological craving for things to be visible, to be categorized, right? We build our entire sense of security around the idea that if we just invent a precise enough instrument, we can subdue the chaotic elements of nature.
But then, you step out of the realm of physical science. You step into the world of predicting the future.
Yes, that's where it gets messy.
Super messy. You start dealing with large-scale human events or economic shifts or sudden geopolitical crises, and suddenly, poof, that precision just evaporates.
The X-ray machine is completely broken.
Yeah, the thermometer's giving you a reading in, like, colors instead of numbers. We find ourselves standing in this landscape of uncertainty that is entirely murky. And what makes this genuinely dangerous, and I mean really dangerous for you, the listener, is that the people society relies on to read those broken instruments are often pretending they know exactly what the squiggly lines mean.
Right, the credentialed experts. They're essentially operating in diagnostic muddy waters, but they're selling us the illusion of crystal clear water.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. We are unpacking the core arguments from a specific text today, Chapter 18 of a document titled 19, The Uncertainty of the Phony.pdf.
It's a heavy title, but a fascinating read.
It really is. And we're going to look specifically at the very people society pays to explain uncertainty to us. So we're talking about philosophers, statisticians, academic economists.
The central thesis here is that these professionals, whose entire job, literally, is to help us navigate the unknown, are failing us spectacularly.
Yes, and they do it by sneaking what the text calls bogus certainties through the back door. Like, they take the chaotic beast of reality, they shove it into a tiny mathematical cage, and then they declare, hey, we've mastered risk.
What's fascinating here is that the author doesn't just lodge a complaint against academia. The source material provides a literal toolkit for spotting these intellectual phonies.
I love that. A toolkit.
Exactly. It offers a conceptual framework to help you identify when an expert is trying to sell you a mathematical model that actually has absolutely no bearing on the real world.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because before we can start spotting these phonies out there in the wild, the text insists we have to understand a fundamental difference. We have to separate fake randomness from real randomness.
Right. Which brings us to the ludic fallacy.
Yes. The word ludic comes from the Latin word for game or play. And the author uses several specific examples of this fake game-like uncertainty. We're talking casinos, random walks in mathematics, throwing a pair of dice, flipping a coin to get a 0 or 1.
Even Brownian motion, which is, the movement of pollen particles suspended in water.
Right. So why does the text call all of this protorandomness instead of just true, actual randomness? I mean, if I flip a coin right now, neither of us knows what it's going to land on, right?
It feels unpredictable to the person flipping it, sure, but it is a very specific, artificially constrained type of uncertainty. The text refers to it as sterilized randomness.
Sterilized, like it's been cleaned up in a lab.
Exactly. Let's break down the casino example because it perfectly illustrates what the author means. When you walk into a casino on a Friday night, the sensory experience is designed to feel wild.
Oh, yeah. Flashing lights, bells ringing, people screaming at the craps table.
Cards flying everywhere. It feels like the ultimate untamed environment of pure chance. People are putting their life savings on the line based on, like, a gut feeling or a lucky number.
Right, it feels like anything could happen at any second.
But underneath all of that sensory chaos, the mathematical reality is incredibly rigid. It's completely sterile. In a casino, the parameters of the universe are entirely known. A roulette wheel has a specific, unchangeable number of slots. A standard deck of cards has exactly 52 cards.
Yeah.
The odds of any single event happening are perfectly calculable.
Right, so while you might not know what the very next spin of the roulette wheel is going to be, the casino management knows exactly what the aggregate outcome of a million spins will be.
Because the casino has a built-in mathematical edge on every single game.
Right.
That edge is the key. The casino relies on the law of large numbers. The text explicitly points out that the casino will beat you in what the author calls the very near long run.
The near long run. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means that if the casino keeps the games running long enough, all the the individual wins and losses, the guy who hits the jackpot, the woman who loses her mortgage, it all cancels out.
Wow.
The randomness literally drops out of the equation through the process of statistical averaging. The only thing left standing after a week of continuous play is the casino's mathematical advantage.
And the author makes a really fascinating point about how to manipulate that environment.
Hmm.
Like the more you extend the period of betting or the smaller you make the individual bet sizes, the more the randomness just completely evaporates.
Yeah, think about the variance. If you walk into a casino and put every single dollar you own on one spin of the roulette wheel, you've created a high variance event.
You're either walking out rich or walking out completely broke.
Exactly. That single isolated event contains a massive amount of noise. But if you take that same amount of money and break it down into 10,000 tiny bets over the course of a year, you are virtually guaranteeing that you will hit the statistical average.
Which means you will lose exactly the percentage of the house edge.
Right. The randomness has been entirely sterilized by the structure of the game.
So protorandomness is randomness with a ceiling and a floor. It's uncertainty where the worst-case scenario and the best-case scenario are mathematically capped from the very beginning.
Exactly. In a game of chance, the universe of possibilities is completely closed.
And the text argues that theories built around this ludic fallacy completely ignore the most dangerous layer of uncertainty, like the unknown unknowns, the things that aren't even on the roulette wheel at all.
Right, the things you couldn't possibly calculate odds for.
It really makes you wonder why our brains are so deeply drawn to this type of safe, neatly boxed uncertainty.
Well, we crave narrative, and more importantly, we crave control. The true unmapped wilderness of reality is terrifying.
Yeah, nobody wants to feel completely out of control.
So when an academic economist or a risk manager builds a mathematical model based on the mechanics of coin flips or Gaussian bell curves, they're constructing a mental sandbox.
The sandbox, right.
The sandbox is safe. You can predict the behavior of sand within the box. It gives society a false sense of security, allowing us to believe that the future of the global economy is just like a complicated math problem waiting to be solved.
Rather than a fundamentally unpredictable landscape prone to massive shocks, it's like, okay, think of it like judging your survival skills by playing a video game on hard mode.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Like when you sit down with the controller, you know the game's going to be tough. The game is going to throw enemies at you. Your health bar will drop. You might lose the level over and over again. But the parameters of that digital universe are fixed by the developers.
You know the rules.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know that if you press the A button, your character jumps. You know the enemies only spawn in specific pre-programmed areas. You're struggling, but you're struggling within a designed system. But if I drop you into the middle of the actual Amazon rainforest with nothing but a pocket knife, there are no fixed parameters. A completely undiscovered species of insect could bite you. A tree branch could just snap and fall on your head.
Or a flash flood could wipe out your camp.
Yes, the rules of survival in real life aren't programmed by a developer. And the author is essentially arguing that our financial and political experts are trying to teach us how to survive in the Amazon by making us master a video game.
And the real danger is that the experts don't even realize they're playing a game.
That's the scary part.
The text stresses that the proponents of these models are unaware of the boundary between the closed system and the open world. They mistake the programmed video game for the actual jungle, and they make real-world decisions based on that fundamental misunderstanding.
Okay, so if casino math is just this protorandomness, how do the experts explain away all the massive, chaotic, real-world problems that their models inevitably fail to predict? Like, when an economic model completely misses a global recession, how do the creators defend themselves?
Well, the author says they do it by pointing a microscope at the subatomic world. They literally invoke physics to excuse their failures in economics.
Okay, wow. So they blame quantum physics.
Basically, the text introduces the greater uncertainty principle here, and it represents a major pivot in the author's critique. The focus shifts to how hard science is misappropriated by the social sciences.
Right. So the text brings up Werner Heisenberg, the German physicist, and his famous uncertainty principle from 1927.
A huge moment in physics.
Yeah, and the basic mechanical idea of Heisenberg's principle is that in the quantum realm, you cannot simultaneously measure the exact position and the exact momentum of a subatomic particle.
Right. The more precisely you measure where an electron is at a given moment, the less precisely you can know how fast it's moving, and vice versa.
So there's a fundamental incompressible limit to what scientific instruments can measure at that microscopic level.
And this concept is frequently held up by academics outside of physics as the ultimate scientific proof that the universe is inherently unknowable at its core. They use it as a philosophical shield.
But wait, here is where I really want to push back on the author's logic, or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Isn't Heisenberg's principle the exact kind of concept the author should love? I mean, the author's entire thesis is about acknowledging the limits of human knowledge and forecasting. Heisenberg literally proved mathematically that science cannot know everything.
It sounds like a perfect match on the surface, yeah.
Right. So why is the author so intensely annoyed by experts bringing up subatomic uncertainty? The text calls the reliance on Heisenberg ludicrous. Why the hostility toward a proven scientific limit?
The hostility stems from how that specific type of subatomic uncertainty behaves when you scale it up to the macro level.
Oh, okay. Scale it up.
The author isn't disputing quantum physics itself. The frustration is directed at social scientists who use quantum physics as a get-out-of-jail-free card. The text breaks down the mechanics of why this is a false equivalence, basically saying subatomic uncertainty is fundamentally Gaussian.
Gaussian, meaning it follows a standard bell curve distribution.
Yes. And the defining characteristic of a bell curve is that extreme deviations become exponentially rare, which means the variations average out over a large sample size.
Okay, I think I'm tracking.
The text uses a very practical macro-level analogy to explain this mechanism. Imagine trying to calculate the total weight of a crowd of 1,000 people standing in a stadium.
Yeah, got 1,000 people.
If one single person in that crowd happens to eat a massive meal and gains a few pounds, or goes on a diet and loses a few pounds, it matters a great deal to that individual. But that single person's weight fluctuation will not significantly change the total aggregate weight of the 1,000 people.
Because the individual variance is completely swallowed by the mass of the crowd.
Exactly. Because for every person who gains a pound, statistically, someone else probably lost a pound. The middle of the bell curve stays stable.
Ah, I see. So when we talk about quantum particles,
we are talking about uncertainties that are, as the text emphasizes, incredibly small and incredibly numerous. Because there are trillions upon trillions of them interacting, they average out.
They obey the exact same law of large numbers that keeps the casino profitable.
Bingo. The author actually writes, if there is one thing on this planet that is not so uncertain, it is the behavior of a collection of subatomic particles.
So when you look at a large physical object, like a wooden table or a rock or a planet, which is composed of an unimaginable number of these particles, the microscopic fluctuations just balance each other out.
Right. The table doesn't suddenly teleport across the room or turn into a liquid because of quantum uncertainty. The macro object is incredibly stable and predictable.
Right. Physical stability of the table is guaranteed by the sheer volume of particles averaging out.
But here is the critical leap the author makes. Political events, social movements, financial markets, and even the weather do not have this handy property of averaging out.
Human history does not follow a bell curve.
No, it doesn't. One single highly impactful event, the outbreak of a war, a sudden market crash, a revolutionary technological breakthrough, it does not get averaged out by a bunch of normal, quiet days.
It permanently changes the entire trajectory of the system.
Exactly. Which exposes the experts' reliance on Heisenberg as deeply misguided.
So when a social scientist builds an economic model that completely fails to predict a massive financial crash, and you ask them why their model failed, they just throw up their hands and point to physics.
Look at Heisenberg. Even quantum mechanics has limits.
Yeah, they say, you can't blame my economic model for missing the crash. And the text argues that this is the ultimate red flag for spotting a phony. They are using the predictable uncertainty of the microscopic world to excuse their inability to understand the unpredictable chaos of human society.
And the author grounds this abstract debate about quantum mechanics by dropping it squarely into the brutal reality of human experience.
The mammoth.
Yes, the mammoth. The text paints a highly specific, vivid scene. It's August 2006. The author is sitting in New York trying to arrange travel to his ancestral village of Amun in Lebanon.
Right, and he's facing a profound logistical and personal crisis. The text states the factual reality of the situation neutrally. The author cannot travel because the airport in Beirut is closed. And the airport is closed due to an active kinetic conflict occurring between Israel and the Shiite militia Hezbollah.
The author is staring directly at true, unquantifiable uncertainty here. He is not sitting in a laboratory wondering about the momentum of an electron. He is wondering about the mechanics of human conflict.
Will there ever be a published airline schedule telling him when this war will end? Will the conflict end at all?
He wonders if his family's house will still be standing, noting that it had actually been destroyed once before in the past.
Yeah. Will his village still be on the map when the smoke clears? Will this localized conflict degenerate into something even more severe and geographically widespread? He has relatives, friends, and physical property exposed to a war zone.
And in the middle of this profound, life-altering unknown, the author imagines academic experts lecturing him about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
It's insulting, honestly.
He questions why anyone should care about subatomic particles that just average out anyway, when we are entirely blind to the massive systemic shocks that actually dictate the course of our lives.
The author calls this the mammoth, standing right in front of us. And unpredictable wars are just one example. The text lists deeply personal things we patently cannot predict. How long we'll be happy with the things we buy, how long our marriages will last, how our new jobs will turn out.
These are the giant, hairy mammoths of uncertainty that trample through our lives, altering our personal histories forever.
And the experts are completely ignoring the mammoth so they can stare through a microscope at a quantum fluctuation they can barely even see.
And this disconnection is not just an annoyance. The text argues that it represents an active threat to society. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings us to the danger of the disconnected philosopher.
Right, because if focusing on casino math and subatomic particles is a massive distraction from the chaos of the real world, who exactly is driving this distraction? The author points the finger directly at academic philosophers and quantitative economists.
The claim the text makes is severe. The author states that people who worry about pennies instead of dollars are a threat to society.
A threat? That's strong wording. But the author acknowledges that these professionals mean well, right? They aren't cartoon villains plotting to ruin the global economy.
No, but the text invokes a concept to explain the danger. The Bastiat argument.
Okay, let's break that down. To understand the gravity of the author's point, we need to define what the Bastiat argument actually is.
It refers to the 19th century French economist Frédéric Bastiat, who wrote an essay about what is seen and what is unseen.
Oh, okay.
Bastiat argued that a bad economist only looks at the immediate, visible effect of an action, while a good economist looks at the unseen consequences, basically the opportunity costs.
And the author applies this to cognitive resources. Like, society has a limited pool of brain power, a limited amount of funding, and limited time to dedicate to studying risk and uncertainty.
Exactly. If we allocate thousands of our most brilliant mathematical minds to studying the sanitized protorandomness of games and Gaussian curves, the seen math, we are leaving ourselves completely exposed to the unseen threats.
Because the unseen threats are the real-world, unquantifiable risks that nobody is paying attention to because they're all too busy refining their little bell curve models.
The text states explicitly that those who distract us with false precision actively increase the risk of black swans, those massive, unpredictable events that reshape our world. Every hour a brilliant academic spends tweaking an equation for a derivatives market is an hour not spent looking at the fragility of the entire banking system.
And the author brings up a specific, fascinating case study to illustrate this cognitive dissonance. He talks about actively going out to look for financial economists who also possessed a background in philosophy.
His reasoning there was really sound. If anyone is going to understand the deep structural flaws in these mathematical economic models, it would be someone formally trained in philosophical critical thinking.
Right. You would assume a philosopher would be the first person to question the underlying premises of the math, to ask if the equation actually matches reality.
So he finds someone who fits this exact profile. This individual earned a PhD in philosophy and then 4 years later earned a second PhD in finance.
2 PhDs.
He published academic papers in both fields. He wrote numerous quantitative textbooks in finance. On paper, this guy is the ultimate hybrid thinker.
But the author says he was entirely disheartened by him. And the reason is that this brilliant individual completely compartmentalized his brain.
The text notes that this individual operated two completely distinct professions that literally never communicated with one another.
It's wild.
When he was wearing his finance hat, writing textbooks and drilling Gaussian methods into the heads of his students, it was as if his philosophical training had been erased from his memory. He completely ignored the deep existential problems of uncertainty.
The text mentions specific philosophical problems that this finance professor ignored, like epistemic opacity and the problem of induction. Let's define those for the listener because they are crucial to understanding why the author is so frustrated.
Go for it.
So, epistemic opacity is basically the idea that the world is foggy. We can see the events that happen, but the true complex web of cause and effect that created those events is opaque to us. We can't see the gears of the universe turning.
And the problem of induction is equally important. It's the philosophical realization that just because something has happened a certain way in the past, it doesn't guarantee it will happen that way in the future.
The classic turkey problem.
Right. The turkey being fed by a farmer every single day. Based on past evidence, the turkey assumes the farmer loves him. The turkey's model of the world works perfectly, right up until the day before Thanksgiving when the model completely breaks down.
The finance professor understood the turkey problem when he was writing philosophy papers, but he completely forgot about the turkey when he was teaching students how to predict stock prices based on past performance.
He just pushed the math forward, regardless of the philosophically shaky ground it was built on.
But then, the text points out, he would probably remember he was a philosopher when it was time to write a philosophy paper. He would switch hats, engage his critical thinking, and write abstractly about the limits of knowledge.
It is wild to consider how a human brain can compartmentalize like that.
How can you understand the deep philosophical problem of how little we actually know about the future, and yet write a textbook teaching 20-year-olds how to perfectly calculate the future risk of a complex financial portfolio?
The author uses a brilliant visual analogy to describe this specific type of compartmentalization. He calls it taking the escalator to the stairmaster.
I love that line so much. It paints such a clear picture. You can visualize someone in their expensive workout gear, standing completely stationary on a mechanized escalator, letting a machine carry them up to the second floor of the gym, just so they can go get on a different machine to artificially simulate the act of climbing stairs.
It is the perfect metaphor for pointless, compartmentalized effort that expends energy without actually moving you anywhere in the real world.
And the author is arguing that this context specificity, this inability to transfer critical thinking from one specialized domain to another, is a fatal flaw in modern academia.
And the philosopher's case is far more dangerous than the gym goer. The text argues that philosophers are supposed to be the watchdogs of critical thinking. They have a societal duty.
They are the ones who are supposed to sound the alarm when the statisticians and economists get too arrogant with their equations. The text actually says that statisticians are computing people, not thinkers, which is definitely a dig.
Oh, absolutely a dig.
But the broader point is that society relies on philosophers to keep the computing people honest, to remind them of epistemic opacity and the problem of induction.
Instead of acting as watchdogs, these philosophers engage in what the author calls a sterile occupation. They practice philosophical thinking on highly specialized, self-referential subjects, what he calls Me Too subjects that other philosophers call philosophy.
Right. They retreat into their own academic sandbox and leave their critical minds at the door when dealing with the messy outside world.
Which sets up one of the most entertaining, detailed, and genuinely baffling scenes in the entire text.
Yes. To really drive home how absurd this domain dependence of skepticism gets, the author takes us inside a highly prestigious academic setting to watch these disconnected philosophers in their natural habitat.
It's like an anthropological study.
Totally. So he describes a Friday afternoon, right around 4 o'clock, at a weekly colloquium at a university in the New York area. You've got a room full of professional philosophers. The author describes them as semi-shabbily dressed, but thoughtful-looking.
The setting is crucial for the irony of the scene. This room represents the pinnacle of intellectual inquiry. These are individuals whose literal job description is to question the fundamental nature of reality.
But the execution of this inquiry is just agonizing. The guest speaker is sitting there with his nose buried in typewritten pages, reading in a complete monotone. The author admits he loses the thread and starts daydreaming because the delivery is so hard to follow.
But the core topic of this highly prestigious, incredibly dense lecture.
Ah, yes. It's a philosophical thought experiment about Martians invading your head and controlling your will, while simultaneously preventing you from knowing that your will is being controlled by Martians.
It is the ultimate abstract exercise. It has zero practical application to human flourishing or real-world problem-solving.
None. And this goes on for 55 minutes of relentless, monotone reading. Then there's a short break, and the room reconvenes for another 55 minutes of intense discussion about implanted chips and outlandish conjectures regarding alien brain control.
The text notes that the philosopher Wittgenstein is occasionally mentioned during the debate because, as the author quips, Wittgenstein is vague enough to always seem relevant to any obscure topic.
So funny. The author is painting a picture of an intellectual echo chamber completely divorced from reality. But then, here's where it gets really interesting. The text delivers the punchline.
The clock strikes 4 p.m. on Friday.
And what happens? The biweekly paychecks for all these deeply skeptical, highly trained philosophers hit their respective bank accounts. And automatically, without a single second thought, about 16% of their earnings go directly into the stock market through the university's TIA-CRA pension plan.
The contrast is just staggering when you analyze the contradiction. Inside that seminar room, these professionals spend hours arguing about the fundamental existence of gods, the semantic theories of truth, the definition of representation, and the literal redness of red.
They are formally trained to brutally dissect and question everything the average person takes for granted. They will entertain elaborate multi-hour theories that their own minds have been hijacked by extraterrestrials.
But when it comes to their actual life savings,
When it comes to the real, chaotic, massively uncertain financial markets, they display absolutely zero skepticism.
they blindly trust the experts managing their pension plan. They hand over a massive chunk of the wealth they traded their time on Earth to acquire, and they dump it into an incredibly complex, unpredictable economic system without asking a single question about epistemic opacity or the problem of induction.
The author asks why they do it. Why do people who question the redness of red not question the stability of the stock market?
The answer the text provides is terrifyingly simple, because they accept that this is what educated people should do with their savings.
Because financial experts tell them to.
Yes, they doubt the evidence of their own physical senses, but they do not, for a single second, doubt the wisdom of their automatic stock market purchases. The author calls this the domain dependence of skepticism.
It's a localized, geofenced critical thinking. It only powers on inside the university classroom. Once they walk out the door and deal with their 401k, they're just as gullible as anyone else. And honestly, if we extrapolate this idea, it forces us to realize how much we all suffer from this domain dependence in our daily lives. Like, we all compartmentalize our skepticism.
We do. It requires an immense amount of cognitive energy to apply rigorous critical thinking to every single aspect of our lives. So we outsource it to domains.
Think about how this manifests today for you, the listener. You might have someone who is incredibly, almost pathologically skeptical about the news they read on social media.
Oh, we all know someone like that.
Right. They fact-check every political meme. They dig into the funding of different media organizations. They assume every headline is a manipulation. They apply intense critical thinking to their media diet.
But then,
that exact same person takes their car to the mechanic. The mechanic says you need a new catalytic converter and it costs $2,000. And the person just hands over their credit card without asking a single question or asking to see the broken part.
right, their skepticism is domain dependent. It exists for politics, but it vanishes for auto repair.
Exactly. The text actually mentions medical doctors in this context, referencing an earlier chapter.
Think about the domain dependence of patients. We might question the motives of a corporation selling us a consumer product, but when a doctor gives us a diagnosis based on a 5-minute conversation, we often accept it completely without a second thought.
We don't ask for the underlying statistical studies of the medication they prescribe. We just assume that because we are critical thinkers in our own professional domain, the doctor must possess infallible critical thinking in theirs.
The author lists several other unquestioned beliefs that these highly educated intellectuals might hold outside their narrow specialty. Like, they might believe, without question, that complex mathematical models can accurately predict societal events.
Or they might hold the bizarre, romanticized belief that surviving a terrible experience like the Gulag will simply cuffen you a bit, completely ignoring the crushing reality of trauma.
They might believe that politicians actually know more about what is going on in the country than their drivers do, assuming that power equates to knowledge.
Or they might blindly believe that the chairman of the Federal Reserve single-handedly saved the economy, attributing massive systemic macroeconomic shifts to the deliberate actions of one individual.
They substitute the authority of the expert for their own critical thinking in every domain except their specific academic specialty. But the text argues that in domains dominated by large-scale, unquantifiable uncertainty like macroeconomics or geopolitics, those experts are operating on an illusion.
They're managing the pension funds using casino math.
Exactly.
Which raises a massive question for the listener. If all these modern academic philosophers are doing it wrong, if they're just taking the escalator to the Stairmaster and wasting our limited cognitive resources debating Martian brain implants, who is doing it right?
Is there any hope for philosophy in the real world?
Yeah. The text actually points to one philosopher that the author genuinely respects, which is rare for this particular book. He brings up Karl Popper.
Karl Popper is presented as the antidote to the disconnected philosopher. The text uses Popper to introduce a fundamental rule for how we should approach learning, knowledge, and problem solving.
What's the rule?
The author states his core belief as a practitioner. You cannot go from books to problems. You must go the reverse, from problems to books.
Problems to books, not books to problems. What does that actually look like in practice? How does a problem-to-book approach differ from what the colloquium philosophers are doing?
It means that genuine intellectual inquiry must be triggered by friction in the real world. You encounter a messy, complicated, unpredictable problem in your life, your business, or your society. The problem exists independent of any theory.
Okay.
Then, once you have identified the real-world friction, you turn to the library. You seek out the philosophical frameworks, the historical data, or the mathematical tools to help you solve that specific problem. The problem dictates the search for knowledge.
As opposed to what the academics do, which is starting with the books. They read a philosophical treatise written by someone else. They find a tiny logical inconsistency on page 400 of that treatise, and then they write another entire book arguing about that specific inconsistency.
Right. They go from books to books, completely bypassing the real world.
The text quotes a joke by the philosopher Daniel Dennett to illustrate this trap. He says, "A scholar should not be a library's tool for making another library."
It becomes an endless, self-sustaining loop of verbiage that has absolutely no impact on human flourishing or our understanding of risk.
And the text includes a powerful quote from Karl Popper himself to back this up. Popper argues that philosophical schools degenerate when their practitioners believe they can philosophize without being forced into it by problems outside of philosophy.
He says, genuine philosophical problems are always rooted outside philosophy, and they die if these roots decay.
If you lose touch with the real world, the philosophy just withers into word games. It becomes a debate about Martians.
Which explains a very interesting historical dynamic that the text points out regarding Karl Popper's legacy. Popper was massively successful and influential outside of academic philosophy departments.
Because his ideas about falsifiability and the limits of knowledge resonated deeply with scientists, with traders, with business decision makers, people who have actual skin in the game and have to navigate real-world uncertainty every day to survive.
But inside the academic philosophy departments, Popper was considered a relative failure by his peers.
Wow.
His fellow philosophers rarely study him. As the text notes, they vastly prefer to write more essays on Wittgenstein. Popper threatened their enclosed sandbox by telling them that a philosophy disconnected from real-world problems is dead.
This brings up a really important clarification regarding the author's own philosophy.
Oh.
When the author attacks this kind of abstract, disconnected philosophy, and when he rails against the use of the bell curve and what he calls Platonicity, it can sound to a casual reader like he's entirely anti-math. It sounds like he doesn't believe in abstract truth at all. To define Platonicity quickly for the listener, it refers to the human tendency to fall in love with neat, pure, idealized forms, like a perfect circle, a perfect bell curve, or a flawless mathematical equation, and then force the messy reality of the world to fit those perfect forms.
Yeah.
So my question is the author entirely against abstract mathematics or the idea that things have a Platonic essence?
The text explicitly addresses this to set the record straight, because it is a very common misunderstanding of the author's work. The author clarifies that he is not making a grand metaphysical claim against the existence of truth.
Okay, good to know.
He is not arguing against essentialism. He states he doesn't care if mathematics would work perfectly in some alternative theoretical universe. He identifies himself firmly as a no-nonsense practitioner. He says, I am not saying that mathematics does not correspond to an objective structure of reality.
So he truly believes that there is mathematics out there that works perfectly to describe the universe. The danger isn't math itself. The danger, the epistemological trap we fall into, is that we put the cart before the horse.
Exactly the issue. Of all the possible mathematical frameworks in the universe, we risk picking the wrong one. We pick the mathematics of the casino, the Gaussian bell curve, and we apply it to the wildly unpredictable domain of social sciences and global economics.
We fall in love with the elegance of the math, the Platonicity, and we become blinded by it.
We force the messy reality of human behavior to fit our neat equations rather than observing the messy reality and admitting that we don't currently possess the math to model it accurately.
The author argues that the truly accurate mathematics for modeling real-world uncertainty are not as easily within our reach as the confirmators, the arrogant experts, would like the public to believe.
Which brings us to the ultimate, terrifying, real-world consequence of all this domain dependence in misplaced math.
Right, because it's not just an abstract debate for university classrooms or philosophy seminars. This blind trust in the wrong experts using the wrong models has massive, tangible societal implications.
When a crisis strikes, when the unquantifiable mammoth is standing in the room, who do we blindly place our faith in?
The author frames this societal vulnerability by looking at how modern culture treats religion versus how it treats the social sciences. He titles this section, The Bishop and the Analyst.
This is a highly provocative social critique. The author expresses intense irritation at a specific kind of modern, selective skepticism. He outlines the behavior of people who aggressively attack the bishop, which serves as a stand-in for organized religion.
And the author points out that these skeptics use intense confirmation bias to tear down religious institutions. Like they will point to history, citing the tragic, undeniable death tolls from things like the Inquisition or various religious wars over the centuries, using those events to prove that religion has been a destructive force for mankind.
And to be clear, the author is not defending those historical atrocities. He is pointing out a massive, hypocritical blind spot in the skeptic's logic regarding where danger actually comes from in the modern era.
Right. The author notes neutrally that these exact same fiercely critical skeptics will completely ignore the massive, catastrophic death tolls caused by modern secular ideologies and scientific overconfidence.
He lists the millions killed by nationalism, the devastating consequences of social science and political theories implemented under Stalinism, or the destruction caused during the Vietnam War by reliance on hyper-rational quantitative models.
The core of the author's argument here is about societal cognitive dissonance. Over the last few centuries, society has learned to apply rigorous historical skepticism to religious authority. We no longer automatically believe in what the text calls papal infallibility.
If a religious leader claims to know the absolute truth about the future, modern society generally demands proof and approaches the claim with immense caution.
But the author's brilliant insight is that we haven't actually gotten rid of our psychological need for an infallible authority. We just swapped out the religious robes for a tweed academic jacket.
We replaced the infallibility of the Pope with the infallibility of the Nobel Prize in economics.
Wow. Yes. We assume that because an economist has a prestigious award, a complex computer model, and speaks in mathematical jargon, their theories cannot possibly lead to disaster.
We assume this despite the overwhelming historical evidence that political and social engineering, driven by confident experts, often ends in massive catastrophe.
The text uses a grounding medical analogy to bring this contradiction home. Think about a priest. A priest is a person who has dedicated their entire life to faith, to the spiritual realm, to the authority of the bishop. But even a priest doesn't go to the bishop when they feel physically sick with a fever.
Their first stop is the medical doctor. The priest recognizes the boundaries of the bishop's domain.
But what happens when our society feels sick? When the global economy is collapsing, when political systems are failing, when we are facing massive, unquantifiable societal uncertainty, we don't have a reliable, scientifically proven doctor for those macro-level crises.
So the text says we stop by the offices of many pseudoscientists, phony statisticians, and economists. We go to the people selling the sterilized protorandomness of the casino because we're completely lacking a better alternative.
We were desperate for someone, anyone, to tell us that the mammoth can be contained in a mathematical cage.
It's a sobering realization. We are trusting our collective future, our pension plans, our economic stability to the people who are busy riding the escalator to the Stairmaster.
So what does this all mean for us? We've unpacked the text's critique of the statisticians, we've explored the domain dependence of the disconnected philosophers, and we've seen how dangerous it is to trust the wrong mathematical models. Where does that leave the individual trying to navigate the world?
It leaves us with the absolute necessity for a practical, grounded philosophy. The text concludes by synthesizing the core lesson into a reality check. The author admits that the situation is difficult.
Really difficult.
Not only do we have to deal with the problem of unpredictable black swans, the massive events that change everything, but we also have to navigate the massive problem of phony experts selling us false certainty. There are fundamental limits to human power and knowledge.
The text lists examples. We cannot do anything to stop the sun from not rising tomorrow. We cannot definitively prove or disprove whether there is an afterlife. And, returning to our friends of the colloquium, we cannot definitively prove or disprove that Martians or demons have taken hold of our brains.
Right, some things are just genuinely beyond our control and beyond our ability to measure.
But the ultimate goal of the text, and of the author's entire worldview, is highly practical. It is not an invitation to wallow in existential dread or nihilism. It is about learning how to avoid being a sucker.
How to avoid being a sucker. That is the street-smart version of epistemology.
I love that.
Knowledge, true understanding of uncertainty, must be converted into a protocol for action. It is not just about learning how to think in an abstract colloquium sense. It is about figuring out what knowledge is actually worth trusting, and then acting accordingly.
Right.
It is about recognizing the limits of the models, recognizing the domain dependence in yourself and others, and building robustness into your life so that when the unquantifiable mammoth of reality crashes through the wall, you survive, regardless of what the experts predicted.
And that requires breaking out of our own domain dependence. Which brings me to a thought for you, the listener, to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. Think back to those philosophers in the text. These were incredibly smart, highly educated people. They used their massive intellects to build unbelievably complex theories about Martian mind control while completely, utterly ignoring the vulnerability of their own life savings in the stock market.
They were brilliant within their narrow domain, and yet they were complete suckers in the real world.
So, look at your own life. Where are you taking the escalator to the Stairmaster? What is one area in your life, your career trajectory, your personal relationships, your financial planning, where you are applying intense, rigorous, exhausting critical thinking to tiny, irrelevant details, while completely ignoring a massive, wildly unpredictable mammoth standing right in front of you?
It's a terrifying question to ask yourself.
But asking it might be the only way to ensure you don't get trampled when the unknown inevitably happens.
It is the first necessary step toward genuine critical thinking. We have to learn to recognize the broken instruments for what they are and stop pretending they can predict the future.
We have to stop staring at the thermometer and start looking at the sky. Thank you for exploring these sources with us and joining us on this deep dive.